Hey guys, Argent Templar here with a reactionary review of The Mortal Instruments Book 1, City of Bones. So this might wind up being two parts, which will probably be a full hour. I know it's long, but this book really kind of triggered me. This is kind of not just represents, I don't know, I guess just societal degeneracy, and the general uncreative nature of modern fantasy, and just how much popular culture has rotted. First off, I find it kind of funny because the book I've written, the fantasy book, which well, I've written a couple fantasy books, but one that's basically was meant to be kind of a satire, turned out to be extremely similar. Or rather, City of Bones turned out to be rather similar, including like some of the lame plot twists City of Bones had. Were basically the same as the stuff I had made as like a satire, um, of like just cliches, just lazy writing, all that stuff. So that's not a good sign. So maybe that's not the best kind of descriptor of the book, but let's get into it. This book, I think, is very instructive because I think if you don't understand where misogyny comes from, or rather why certain people just don't like women, I think this book is kind of like the ideal way to kind of red pill people on that. Um, because the female characters are just so unlikable in this book, and they embody kind of all the worst things about postmodern liberal women. It just really triggered me, and it really just kind of filled me uh, with rage and disgust. Aside from that, everybody else is just they're just such. I get tired of these fucking books where everybody's a fucking liberal, like everybody's just like a swipple, and they can be like members of like this ancient order of like knights who protect the world from demons, but they're still fucking swipples. They can't let anyone else have a viewpoint. Everyone just has to be a postmodern white liberal. And this book's basically like that. So, let's go into detail about the Mortal Instrument City of Bones. So the plot is kind of mind-numbingly repetitive and boring. So I'm just going to start with kind of the backstory and then go through what happens in the book and just give commentary along the way. Um, so I understand some of this stuff might have changed in the sequels, but the sequels I have no fucking intention to ever read the sequels. I just read this because I have to stack these every day because it was on sale on Audible and because I was just kind of curious because it's kind of like the new big thing. So, the backstory to City of Bones is thousands of years ago, the Archangel Raziel gave humanity a gift so that they might be able to fight angels. Sorry, fight demons, which is funny because the exact same thing happens in my fantasy book. But once again, I only read this book like yesterday. I've been writing the other one for at least on and off for like 10 years. Long before City of Bones actually like was written even. So obviously they didn't copy me, but it's just something we came up with independently. Um, but yes, the Archangel Raziel dipped some of his blood into a cup and mixed it with human blood, and the cup produces an infinite amount of the mixed blood between an angel and a human. Uh, this blood, when drinking by someone who's worthy, transforms them into a shadow hunter, which is a really or a Nephilim. Shadow hunter is a fucking lame name, so we're just gonna call them Nephilim for the rest of this. Um, One may wonder, wait a minute, that's not what a Nephilim is. A Nephilim is a born of the sexual union of a fallen angel, or rather, not a fallen angel, a neutral angel, because there's neutral angels, there's evil angels, and there's good angels. The good ones are the ones who reside in heaven. The evil ones reside in hell, and the Nephilim, or the neutral angels, or the Watchers as they're called, inhabit the earth. So, they aren't actually Nephilim. The person who wrote this really doesn't seem to understand anything, but whatever. So yeah, so they're Nephilim, so they kind of have like superpowers, and stuff like that, largely in the form of tattoos. They tattoo themselves up and they use them to release powers, which also happens in my fantasy book. Kind of. Once again, it's kind of bizarre, some of the similarities. So that happened. So the Shadow Hunters have their own nation, which is kind of cool, in between France and Germany. It's protected by magic, though, and no one knows about it. The Shadow Hunters were basically a gift to humanity, and their job is to kill demons and half breeds who get out of control. The world is also populated by a number of other people, including fairies who are half angel, half demon, werewolves, vampires, and warlocks. Warlocks are half demon, half human, etc. Um, and shadow hunters largely kill those who turn bad. They don't try to kill all of them anymore because that would be racism, as we'll get into. In fact, the main character is such a just fucking feminist kind of cunt that at one point she's like, "We're so racist against demons. They just want to leave hell." Or there's like one part where that I was like, "Fuck you." But anyways, so yes, so they form the clave or the conclave, and they like train shadow hunters and send them to kill demons to protect humanity. Over time, though, they grow increasingly lenient and begin to make alliances with the various non-humans, the vampires, the werewolves, etc. Because vampirism is a disease, is a sexually transmitted disease from hell, which is kind of funny, but it's also just fucking lame. But yeah, so they eventually sign like this accord that basically states that people who drink blood and werewolves and shit, that's all okay. You just have to play nice, but we're gonna not actively try to hunt them down or marginalize them anymore. So the Shadow Hunters did that. So shortly before the events of the book, about 15 years before the events of the book, there's a guy named Valentine. Valentine is kind of interesting. He's implied to be a, and this is kind of a theme in liberal books. Deeply religious people are never overtly religious. It's just stated they're religious, but they don't seem to take any aspect of their religion into themselves. It's strongly implied, as his organization's motto is "This sign conquer," and his personal motto is "Deus Vult," and he believes himself to be God's warrior. That Valentine is a traditionalist Catholic, but this is never explored. He never references Jesus, etc. And this is kind of something liberals I find think. They think that people are just generically religious. They don't think people have any loyalty to a particular tradition. They don't understand that theology exists. They don't understand that like Christian democracy would be different from Islamism, because they're just liberals and they think all people are fundamentally the same. So Valentine's apparently a traditionalist Catholic, but nothing about his character would suggest this other than them just explicitly basically stating it. So he decides that the world needs to be purged of non-humans. Why he decides this is never explained. His father was eaten by a werewolf. But no, he's just evil, and the other side is never presented. Why is he afraid of vampires, werewolves, and fairies? I don't know. So I'm just going to make shit up. My guess is he's afraid of them is because vampires fucking eat people. I mean, that's what vampires fucking do. They eat people. They consume life. They are an apex predator that feeds exclusively on human beings and turns them into vampires or kills them. Werewolves go into psychotic rages and devour people during the full moon, and it's a disease that spreads to other people. Um, Fairies do all kinds of disturbing shit, and warlocks can summon demons to eat people. Presumably, he just got tired of these fucking half humans constantly terrorizing mankind, and he decides to do something about it. He gathers together the Circle, who's basically a reactionary group who's tired of the liberals who run the Shadow Hunter or the Nephilim, trying to make nice with the various non-humans. And his plan is to interrupt the Accords and to slaughter the non-humans who are there, to start a grand war, etc. part of his plan is to use the mortal cup, the mortal cup being the thing you drink from, to become a shadow hunter and use it to dramatically increase the shadow hunter population. This is done because the number of demons is rapidly increasing, and the shadow hunters, because of low birth rates, because they're kind of modernist degenerates, and a general reluctance to take any risk, are gradually dwindling, and they're relying more and more on aid from non-humans to combat demons. Non-humans who are themselves all part demon and whose loyalty is constantly questionable, considering many of them can summon demons. Um, so yeah, so all that shit happened. So he said, okay, well he was going to perform a coup and raise a new army of shadow hunters, drive back the night, and carry out a direct war against the demons who are increasingly devouring people. This is evil though because he was going to kill innocent non-human people. Also, as the main character Clary says, he's a member of a white power hate group. It's so mean. He hates the vampires because they eat people, and he hates the fairies who are also twisted and everything else. And it's just he's just he's an evil racist. Um, Valentine's never allowed to explain. They never explain why any of these people dislike non-humans. That's just a given that it's bad. Because uh, vampires and werewolves and and fairies, despite not having any human blood in them, are all people too, except that they're different. And they kill demons because demons are inherently evil, but the idea that any of this demonic taint from hell might make someone bad or dangerous is just it's just racism. It's just evil racism. And this is just like how everything. Why does everything have to be like a fucking SJW book? And people say, well, Argent, your books, they're all like reactionary. Yeah, but I refer to them that way. I don't hide that they have a political motive. They obviously have a political motive. I don't take a blatantly political book and say, oh, it's not political, it's just teen fiction. I don't do that. It's just fucking dishonest. So yeah, so Valentine attempted his coup, and he was defeated because, um, what was his fucking name again? Luke, who is his former second in command, became a werewolf, and because of my feelings, and because Valentine rejected him because he kind of became a monster, he was able to foil Valentine's plan. Valentine fled with his son and took on the identity of some other guy. He raised his son Jace in secret. Jace is obviously his son, but apparently no one has been able to figure this out. And Valentine was able to live in the Shadowhunter country with his son for over a decade, training him in his philosophy and his ways. So that happened. Apparently, that's supposed to be a revelation, but I kind of figured that plot twist out. I figured the plot out like immediately, like at the very beginning of this book. Not because I'd ever read anything about it. It's just very obvious. So Valentine went and did that. His wife fled with his daughter Clary and the mortal cup and went into hiding. So because his wife was a selfish bitch, she took the mortal cup, and now they aren't able to make more shadow hunters, and they're gradually going extinct while the number of demons are increasing. So because she felt that her husband was an evil racist, she basically has condemned humanity to not have the forces they need to defend themselves, and this is viewed as a good thing. So we come to the present. Um, Clary's mother has used a warlock, hired a warlock with demonic magic to put a block on her mind to prevent her from seeing the supernatural because of my feelings. Um, and because they don't want her to know about the supernatural world. So, Clary is at a club, ironically enough, called Pandemonium, where she sees a group of shadow hunters killing a demon. One of the shadow hunters is her brother, Jace, but she doesn't know he's her brother, and she's immediately drawn to him. Shortly after that, she just continually thinks about this. We are also introduced to Simon, who is basically a cuck. He has been in love with Clary for the last 10 years. He's been constantly making hints to her, but she doesn't give a shit about him because she's a self absorbed bitch. So Simon tries to confess to her a number of times, but she keeps abandoning him and running off to chase Jace down, even though she doesn't even know who he is. So Simon basically gets friend zoned for being an ordinary boy and for being a nice guy. You see, being a nice guy is a bad thing. She likes Jace despite the fact that Jace is basically kind of a sociopath and is kind of a complete douche. Because that's just kind of the way women are. And people wonder, like, why stuff like MGTOW and other things exist. And people will be like, well, that's just kind of the way women are. Okay, well, if that's the way women are, then why do we act like they have agency? I mean, that's kind of the premise of feminism, isn't it? That women have agency, that they can make their own decisions, that they'll make the right decisions. But in this book, she's attracted to a guy who's basically kind of a sociopathic douchebag, and like the guy who loves her, she just kind of friend zones. I mean, as the book goes on, she keeps asking Simon to risk his life for her, um, and keeps asking him to just do shit for her, and she just continually just whines and cries about how Simon's being mean to her because he doesn't want to help her because she rejected him. And she doesn't even favor him with a real rejection. She even tells him that he's one of the three people she's loved in her life. She's like, "Oh, I love you, Simon, but I don't love you like that." And she just continues to ignore him. She never like pays any attention to him. It's stated that she keeps forgetting that he even exists, and she keeps asking him to do shit for her. And then Simon's like, I don't really, if you're going to treat me this way, I really have no desire to like be around you and to help you. And she's like, well, I just want you to risk my life for me. I just love you as a friend, so you should risk your life for me. Isn't that enough? That you can be close to me and like be my servant while I'm like fucking Jace? And Simon's like, no. I love you, and I've always been there for you, unlike this douchebag who's a complete asshole to you. Um, I don't want anything to fucking do with you if you're gonna treat me like that. And she's like, oh, woe is me. So, like, Simon comes across her making out with Jace, and Simon is just like, well, fuck you. I just told you that I love you, and you didn't even give me like a formal rejection, and now you're making out with Jace. And then rather than take responsibility for it, Clary's just like, this is my punishment for being happy. Simon's being mean to me because he doesn't like the fact that I immediately started making out with a boy after he basically confessed with me. I started making out with this asshole I've known for like 2 days, whereas I won't even give him a chance, and we've known each other for 10 years. And people will be like, well, Simon's entitled. No, Simon was, I don't know. I'm going to defend him, even if he is kind of a nerd. Um, Clary just kind of completely lies to him, manipulates him. She tells him that she loves him, that he's her best friend, that she's close to him, that she depends upon him. And then when it kind of comes time for her to like act on any of it, it turns out that it was all bullshit and that she was just using him because he was the only person who was like attracted to her and was the only person who was like nice to her. So she feels she doesn't owe him anything for putting up with her shit over all these years. And she kind of does. I mean, that's kind of how relationships work. It's give and take. And the fact that, like, Simon wants something in return uh, for basically being the man in her life and being there for her is treated as whiny and self entitled. Whereas Clary is the most whiny and self entitled bitch I've ever seen in my life. So anyway, so yeah, so basically what happens is the Shadow Hunters realize Clary can see them, and they find out that she is actually a Shadow Hunter. So they kidnap her and take her to see their leader. It turns out there's like some school because we have to rip everything off and we have to rip Harry Potter off. So there's a school for shadow hunters in New York. And Jace and the other shadow hunters take her there, and we're introduced to Jace's partner, who's some gay guy who's in love with her, because we need to have a gay guy in this. Even though he's a completely superfluous character, he's just there because the shadow hunters are mean to gays, despite the fact that they're not religious or traditional or conservative in any way. There's just the struggle's real, man, and they just hate the gays because I think they want shadow hunters to reproduce because it's really hard to make new people shadow hunters. So there's an expectation that they have children, and expecting people to have children and maintain a functioning society is evil sexism. Um, so yeah, so there's him, and then there's Isabella, who's Alex's brother, who's really hot, and she's just kind of a degenerate who fucks random men, and just kind of is a whore. That's pretty much all we're told about them. So I'm not going to really mention them again because they can both go fuck themselves. Simon, for whatever reason, comes with her and like drools over Isabella because he has no concept of loyalty. Because that's kind of how liberals, like the author of this, view people. They just view them as like these hedonistic, postmodern degenerates who just fuck everything that means and have no concept of loyalty or honor. So despite the fact that Simon was in love with Clary for the last 10 years, he just immediately kind of abandons her and starts lusting after Isabella, who's just basically a skank. So yeah, so this stuff is happening, and then it turns out that her mother has been kidnapped by Valentine because Valentine has finally found her um, because the head of the school that Clary was taken to is working for Valentine. So he tells her where Clary's mother is, and he kidnaps her and is going to torture her to get the mortal cup, so he can make more shadow hunters and save the world from a demon invasion, and kill the non-humans. But he's the bad guy because he's an evil racist. So they go back and they go back to like her mother's apartment to try and save her from Valentine, but there's a demon there for some reason. Because Valentine, despite being a reactionary purist, relies on demons to make his army. Why a reactionary purist would rely on demons for his army, I'm not sure. It doesn't really make any sense, but he's just evil. You see, he's evil because he has a ultra right wing ideology, but the ultra right wing ideology does not inform any of his actions or behavior. It just makes him a bad guy. So you would think that him being basically a shadow hunter nationalist would mean he would like care about shadow hunters, but he doesn't because he's an evil racist, and he also he uses demons. I don't fucking know. So anyways, they find out that Clary's mother has been taken away. Um, so her and Jace get there and they talk to some fortune teller who's like the adopted child of a warlock or something, and she's like, she apparently runs like a halfway house where like escaped non-humans hide out, etc. So they find out that she has this portal that she had been hiding, that she had kept for use if whatchamacallit, her mother needed to get away. So for whatever reason, because they're tripping balls or something, it was very confusing when I read this like a couple hours ago. They decide to go through this portal, her and Jace, as like part of their investigation to try and find her mother and to find where she hid the mortal cup. So they go through a portal and they wind up outside of Luke's house. Luke is the other guy who's fucking friend zoned in this thing. Luke was a scholarly no, was a guy who was in love with Clary's mother before she even met Valentine, but she friend zoned him because of reasons. Because he was always nice and decent to her, and she didn't want that. She wanted a psychopathic megalomaniac who would physically abuse her. So that's just kind of the way her mother is. Her mother is kind of a complete whore too. She's also a bitch. So her mother's a complete whore. She's kind of a whore, and Isabella's a whore. And they basically just kind of eat men alive and use them to carry out their really petty, happy, clappy pet plans. And people like this book is kind of like, if this book wasn't written by a feminist, you'd think like a misogynist wrote this book. Um, but even after her mother rejected Luke and he became a werewolf and he lost everything, and even after she turned on her husband and stole his daughter from him and the thing that would ensure the survival of their people, the mortal cup, she still won't give Luke a chance. She won't go into a relationship with him. She keeps him around and makes her raise him, uses his feelings to make him protect and raise her daughter. But she won't have sex with him. She won't give him a chance. She won't even go out on a date with him. She just makes him raise his mortal enemy's child. Um, etc. Which is just how much of an ungrateful bitch she is. I mean, like, you think she could have done something for Luke. You think she could have, like, given him a hug or something, but no. She just friend zoned him, and even though there were no other males in her life, she decided to just do nothing for him. And not even give him a chance, even though he's the only one who consistently loved her her entire life. But she rejected him to go with the rich bad boy. And she continues to reject him for the rich bad boy even after she abandons him. So yeah, so they go to Luke, and it turns out like Luke is talking to some of Valentine's goons, and they turn out that Luke is like the Valentine's goons are still around, and Luke states that he has no interest in Clara's mother or the cup, despite the fact that it's an obvious lie. Of course. So then we get like some lame romantic scenes. We get like they go to a party at like a restaurant filled with non-humans, and like the shadow hunters flirt with the non-humans, and they're like, they're hot, man. We can have some like mixed species children or something. And I just fucking like I just the whole just everybody fucks everybody thing just fucking disgusts me. And that's kind of how it works. They're like, oh man, I'm gonna go and bang that random like half elf. I'm gonna go like bang that half demon man because she's got like long claws, and that's just kind of the attitude they take. Even if this is a young adult book, so they can't like fill in the blanks, but that's kind of the attitude they take when they're at like parties and shit. So that stuff happens. So they kind of like somehow figure out that Clara has a mental block or something that was put on her by her mother by hiring a half demon to fuck with her brain using mind magic. So they get invited to the half demon warlocks party, and we get some like shenanigans there. And then the half demon admits that he did it after they like ask him about it, and he's like, well, there's nothing we can really do to remove the block. It'll just go away in time, and you will regain your memories, and you will learn to be the person you were meant to be, a shadow hunter, or something like that. So then, like, I'm skipping a lot of stuff just because, like, you guys have no idea just how much shit there is in this. Like, them just going from place to place, etc. I'm just trying to focus on kind of the main plot points. So during this, what's his name is trying to. Oh, Simon's trying to impress her at the party. So he drinks some random shit, and the random shit he drinks transforms him into a rat, and a group of vampires take the rat and are gonna eat him. Because like that's just the shit vampires do. They turn people into rats and eat them. And they have like an abandoned hotel that's implied that they just drag people from the local community and eat them and make them into vampires. So like people wonder why um, guys like Valentine want to exterminate the vampires when they just kind of kill random people and are a complete menace to society. But Valentine is an evil racist, despite the fact that vampires are apex predators. So they go there to save Simon, and they manage to save him after just like a bunch of bullshit. So they save him, and then they take him back to the like the school, and this is where Simon formally gets cocked. So he's all battered and beat up, and he's sleeping. And then Jace comes by, and he's like, Clary, despite the fact that like you aren't attractive, I find you super attractive because I'm the handsome male lead, and this is everything has to fucking rip off Twilight. So I know that you're not attractive, but for some reason I'm extremely attracted to you, and I'm actually in love with you for some reason. But Jace is also a douche, so he mocks her and he constantly uses sexual innuendo. And I think he talks about like all the he implies he just fucks women all the time, and that he like revels in having like sexual relations with them and then not having any emotional connection with them. So he decides to be sweet because it's her birthday, and like this is just kind of revealed for some reason. So it's Clary's birthday, and he like gets like a picnic, and they go to the greenhouse in the school, and then they just like Jace tells like this depressing story about how Valentine raised him, although he doesn't know it's Valentine yet, despite the fact it's really obvious. Valentine was under an assumed name, and he doesn't know who his actual father is. So yeah, so Jace tells her like about his life, and tells her like how hard it was, etc., and how like what a great man his father was, etc. And then for no sense at all, they kiss, and she's in love with him, despite the fact that he's her brother. Yeah, so she starts making out with her brother. It's really obvious that he's her brother. He even has the same name as her brother. Um, whatchamacallit, he's Jonathan Christopher, which was the name of her brother. She had the same mother, etc. It's just the most like fucking obvious thing ever, but Claire's a degenerate, so she starts making out with him. They go down. Simon's in her room, but she starts making out with Luke in front of the door, and Simon comes out, and he's really sad. And then Clary's like, "Why can't you be happy for me that I'm in love with this dude I just met, and I just cucked you, literally?" So, Simon gets angry and goes away, and everybody like is angry at Simon for not wanting to be cucked. So, um, the mental block on Clary continues to fade, and she figures out that the Mortal Cup is hidden in a tarot card that was given to the fortune teller who lives downstairs. So we are treated with this book's laughable attempt to deal with religion. What happens is they decide, okay, we have to go in force to go and get the Mortal Cup from the fortune teller. So they go to a Catholic church, and they're like, well, why is the Catholic Church in line with the shadow hunters? And Jesus is like, no, because all religions are equal and all religions are the same. The shadow hunters are members of all religions, even though a fucking Christian angel created the shadow hunters. They're not loyal to what the angel believed. And Jesus isn't loyal to his father's traditional Catholicism. He's like, I'm an atheist because I don't think I think God is mean because he let my mother die. And rather than attempt to investigate any of the intellectual arguments for or against God, or investigate the power of evil, I'm just going to believe that God doesn't exist because my father died. And I won't respect anything. And I think it's stupid that people believe in religion even though he idealizes his father. So the Shadowhunters, despite being founded by a Christian angel, being European, etc., don't follow a particular religion. They just have this, and they aren't even spiritual. They're fucking the offspring of an angel, but as Jay said, that's just a rumor. Just because demons exist doesn't mean angels also exist. Just because the holy weapons and the thing like holy weapons work, that doesn't mean that there's a god or that there's a heaven or that there's the supernatural forces of good. Actually, it does mean that, but Jace is just kind of a spoiled brat, and he doesn't want to be held responsible for any of the bullshit he's done. So Clary's like, I've never been in a church before. I've heard of these things. My mother wasn't religious. I've seen them in animes though, and they look kind of cool in animes. And this is just kind of the degeneracy. You're like, oh, I've never been in a church. I don't care about religion. Religion's irrelevant. to modern society, even in a world where fucking demons exist and they use holy water against them. They don't give a shit about religion. It's just because the author doesn't give a shit about it. So no one's religious in this book. No one believes in shit. Because the author can't read fucking demographic statistics. Even in country like I hate this shit. Even in countries where like 98% of the population is Christian, like Greece or like Italy, in movies no one's religious. Because the people who make it impose their beliefs on them. So none of the Shadowhunters are religious, and none of them have any kind of sexual moral code, despite being a religious order. Um, so yeah, so they get the weapons, and they make Simon borrow his friend's van and drive them because none of the Shadowhunters have driver's licenses or any means of transportation. So Clara makes the guy she just cocked risk his life to help her in her bullshit. Because Simon's a cuck, so he does it. So they get to the apartment building, and it turns out that it's the whole thing's a trap. So as soon as Clara retrieves the mortal cup, um, the Valentine and his goons show up, and they take the mortal cup and kidnap Jace. So Clara goes back to the Institute, and it turns out that the head of the Institute is actually working for Valentine, and he was the one who tripped Valentine off. Because he decided to side with Valentine during the uprising, where Valentine attempted his coup. He was cursed to never be able to go outside, and he was um, basically bound to stay in a crappy building for all of eternity. I mean, that's cool, isn't it? So he's evil because he wanted to leave the comfort of there and go off. And it turns out that he was the only one who was punished because all the other members of the Circle were rich and powerful and paid off the corrupt government that controls the Shadowhunters. But we have to fight to defend this corrupt government because Valentine's an evil racist. So Clara goes, and it turns out Luke shows up, and he's like, "Yo, I'm a werewolf. What's up? I'm in love with your mother, even though she cucked me at least twice. And I'm going to save you, and I'm going to rescue her, even though she'll never return my affections." So him and Clara go to confront Valentine, and they bring along Luke's wolf pack, who Luke throws into battle against an army of zombies created by Valentine. Once again, despite Valentine being a reactionary purist, he's willing to use zombies. He's willing to use zombies to kill his enemies. So he uses like demonic powers to summon demons and zombies because his ideology is religious puritanism. Makes a whole lot of sense. So because Luke has like a fucking hard-on for this woman who never gave him the time of day, he decides that he's going to waste his entire pack to attack this army of like armored zombies, and a substantial number of his pack get killed during the assault. Because he wants pussy. It's like it's not even his wife. He's trying to save this fucking woman who cucked him. I mean, he's just such a fucking loser. I hate him. He's just fucking Luke. So yeah, so they break in and they rescue Clara's mother, um, and they kill Valentine's Shadowhunter goons in a gory way, for reasons because they're evil racists. And then they confront Valentine, who's with Jace. And Valentine basically explained like the obvious. He's like, "Jace, you are my son." And he's like, "Clara, you are my daughter, and you two are involved in wincest." And then it's literally like Star Wars. It's funny because this also happens in my book. The main character of my book is obviously the daughter of the main villain, and it's like a running joke that it's the most obvious shit possible, but it's never explicitly stated. And like the other characters have figured it out. They're like, "Wait a minute, that means you have to be the daughter of," and then like something always interrupts them. So that basically happens here, and Valentine's like, "Yes, you are my daughter and you are my son. The whole thing is a lie." They just made all this shit up, and he like starts to try to explain things, and his daughter's like, I don't want to listen to you because I'm open-minded, and being open-minded means I can't consider other people's ideas. You're an evil racist, so you don't have a right to an opinion. I'm not going to listen to your side of the story. I'm not going to let you explain your motivations or justify any of the things you did. I'm not going to like do anything. I'm not even going to accept that Jace is my brother because you're evil. Okay. So like the people who eat people aren't evil, but Valentine's evil because he's kind of pragmatic and real. And he's like, the human world's going to be overrun if we don't make more shadow hunters. But that would be sacrificing people for the greater good. And you can't sacrifice anything for the greater good. And you can't make morally questionable decisions because everything has to be like this over idealized feminist my feelings crap. And Clara was going to trade the Mortal Cup to Valentine in exchange for her mother. So she was willing to give the ultimate weapon to a man who she believed to be her world's equivalent of Hitler because of my feelings, because she wanted her mother back. So she basically has no ability to think in any sort of objective, pragmatic way, and she just kind of wants to do what makes her feel good and what will make her like she just has such fucking high time preference. So Jace is like, I love you, father. You raised me well. Together we will crush the non-humans. And then Clara just makes like a bunch of really unconvincing speeches about how he's evil and about how their mother apparently thought Jace was dead and that was the reason she abandoned him and just all this stuff. And then Jace is like, you're right. My father is evil. And then like a bunch of bullshit happens. Luke shows up and he's like, I'll never forget when you cucked me. And then they have a duel which Luke loses because he's an asshole. And then Valentine's like, very well, my own flesh and blood. You betrayed me. And then he like gives this big speech about how his wife left him and how his children have turned against him and how they have no loyalty to their own blood. And they're like, blood and race don't matter. Your nation doesn't matter. What matters is that you're loyal to the people you care about. So your efforts to save your people, to reinvigorate the Shadow Hunters and to protect the world from demons is evil racism. You should accept demons and love them because they're people too. And I love Jace, even though he's my brother and it's incest, because this is the modern era. And being gay is okay. Being in a relationship with a vampire is okay. Fucking demons is okay. Wincest is okay. Polyamory is okay. Being a whore is okay. And cucking people is okay because we live in enlightened times. So, Valentine's like, fuck you, bitch. I'm out of here. And then Valentine jumps through a portal. He's like, I'd love to stay and shot, but I have to fly. So he takes the Mortal Cup and runs away. So then the book ends with Luke being like, well, guys, this was kind of a disaster, but I got my waifu back, even though she'll never show me the slightest bit of affection. And that's the end of the book. So what have we learned from this? That Valentine did nothing wrong, that he's literally the only person trying to deal with the demonic threat, that the Shadow Hunters are run by a corrupt liberal oligarchy, etc., that you should love and accept vampires even if they eat people, and that incest is a good thing. Also that feelings trump everything. So this book basically explains why, like, the MRAs exist, why MGTOWs hate women, why reactionaries in general just are often very skeptical about why feminism kind of destroyed society, because that's just kind of the decisions that like feminists make. Like, oh, I'm gonna give the ultimate weapon to my mortal enemy because of my feelings. Oh, we have to be nice to the demons because of my feelings. We have to let them kill and rape people. And there's kind of a moral nihilism inherent to this book. Um, Valentine is really the only character who has a moral core or any sort of worldview. Everyone else is just really kind of self-interested douches who just basically want to enrich and empower themselves. And he's kind of the only person with kind of any ideological vision, and he's the only one who's trying to do something about a corrupt and fallen world. Anyways, that's the reactionary review. Sorry it was very long, but I wanted to go over a lot of this stuff. This is Argent Templar signing out.